Dixie Land Conference is a mix of the Southeastern Conference and the Atlantic. So what we have here is all the Florida schools and the schools that weren't taken by the Southwest and some other Southeastern schools. I just didn't want to call it the Southeastern Conference. I just didn't want to call it the SEC. They have too much power. Maybe it's just as somebody that thinks the SEC is too full of themselves. I didn't want them to get to keep their name.
I want that name to die.
Everybody else changes their name. But there's a lot of rivalries that are kind of rebuilt here that were like original college football rivalries that kind of died because of the money-grabbing conferences, to where you have a team within your state or in a different state that's in a completely different conference. So there's rivalries like Auburn and Georgia Tech, who first played in 1892. You know, Auburn and Clemson first played in 1899. And now we get them in the same conference again. Clemson and Georgia, you know, or
Miami and Alabama. That sounds crazy.
Or Clemson and South Carolina. Keep it in the state, you know? And then you got the Florida rivalries. You got Florida State, Florida, and Miami all jostling for position.
With UCF.
And
UCF saying, we're here, baby.
Yeah.
We're here, baby. So that's it. There are the three. With UCF, there are two other smaller schools that make the jump here. USF, the University of South Florida Bulls, which I've done a dynasty with this team in this format on NCAA football because I love playing in the stadium.
Did you know Raymond James Stadium?
That's right.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay.
Did you know that the name for the rivalry for UCF and USF is the War on I-4?
Yes, I did. Doing this research, it is a really good name, and if Iowa and Iowa State were only on the same interstate, you know, then it would work.
When I'm looking at this and I'm looking at these divisions, when I look at these scenarios, I said it while you were talking. I kind of blurted it out there, but like Miami could be playing Alabama in a championship game scenario, like, or seeing Florida State playing against Georgia. Well, I guess that's not that weird because that's ACC, but or maybe say UCF somehow wins the East and they could be going up against, you know, Alabama or Ole Miss or something like that. Like, this conference is the most bonkers looking conference to me because this gives a lot of power to the SEC.
This is still immediately a very powerful conference because within this conference there is Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and whoever else decides to come out of there. So SEC fans, calm down. You still have a very powerful conference. There have been some changes. There is no Tennessee. We'll get to that later.
Well, Tennessee sucks anyway, so.
Yeah, well.
But I like this one. I am a little worried that it is heavy-handed, especially in the East, because...
You think the East? I would say the...
Well,
okay.
I'm sorry. It's heavy-handed in the West. What I meant to say is I can see the disparity in the East because UCF, you know, everybody loves that Cinderella story, but in reality, could they survive? And this is the question...
UCF and USF.
That they should... this is the question that they have to answer now is, can they actually compete at the highest level? Can they play and beat Clemson, Florida State, these teams every year?
Just like Southern Miss, the upstart in the other division.
Where in the West, the only team that maybe could they compete with these guys is Southern Miss. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn, Georgia Tech. I could all see them being very competitive against each other.
Right.
UCF, it slips me up. UCF and USF, I just don't know, could have those legs.
They've been two of the best teams in the American Conference for two or 3 years in a row.
I think they would be.
But they're not playing Florida State.
I think you're right,
but they're both the teams that are looking to build to be even better than. And they're playing very well. They're both.
Now we get rid of the UCF Florida stupid thing where they have to alternate where they play each other and they play each other every year. But Ole Miss was 6-6 this year. Southern Miss would not be a bottom dweller. I don't think.
I think they would.
Georgia Tech hasn't been very good for a few years now either.
I tried to create all conferences thinking about not creating bottom dwellers. So here, let's do the divisions in the West. And these divisions, what's most importantly, they're not exactly geographically correct, but what is most important is keeping in-state teams in division if possible. Would you agree to that?
Yes.
So that's what we tried to do here, or I tried to do here. So in the West, even though you're going to say, what? Those schools, we have Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Southern Miss, and then Georgia and Georgia Tech. Let's get them in the same division. Same thing I wanted to do with Iowa and Iowa State. Let's get teams like that in division.
Did you make Clemson Alabama an anchored rivalry?
You bet I did.
So we get the championship every year.
It's like veto powers. It's like the checks and balances in our government. They could be
playing each other twice a year. Every year.
You know what? They could realistically play each other 3 times a year if they play their anchored rivalry, conference championship, and one makes an at-large bid into, which I could see happening.
I want to throw up.
And exactly.
I want to throw up.
People say that we see the same teams every year, but how much more are those? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but Clemson and Alabama is so much fun to watch.
I know, we get spoiled with it because they're both very good, but at the same time, it's like, why? This isn't fair.
Listen to this, Jake. You are literally talking about the birth of a Duke, North Carolina rivalry, basketball, but in football. That is what this is. Even though it's not the same state, I get that that's a little harsh, but you're talking 2 of the best teams year in and year out.
I just think people would lose interest.
Fighting to get to their conference championship. So people could lose interest, but that's why you have 10 teams, not just these are 2 of the 4 teams. You have 10 teams, which if you listen to the long form of this, we explain our 10-team playoff system. But in the other division in the East, Clemson and South Carolina, yes, I love it. That's what I was trying to do here. And then the Florida schools, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Central Florida, and South Florida. Where do you guys want this conference championship?
Atlanta. Atlanta sounds like a good spot.
New one.
The Benz Stadium is incredible. So
right.
And it's been host to a lot of big events already in a short period of
which they want to do.
Just don't put Georgia in there.
No.
They'll choke.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for listening to our in-depth analysis on how to restructure college football. If you want to hear all conferences, you can hear the other installments of this on the Loud Sports Podcast or the long form on the Loud Sports Podcast, or you can read it on my website at cornfedmedia.org.